two things that happened there that I remember vividly, and they're both kind of serendipitous lifesavers. We were doing an operation. We had to drive out to another compound in the district and spend the night in that compound.
Right.
And so we stayed out there for the night. Nothing happened. It was just a very quiet night. And so when the three of us got up and, started to get ready to go the next morning, the damn Jeep wouldn't start. Would not start. Ran perfectly the night before. But I guess it's like your car, something. And we putzed with it for probably an hour and got it going. Not me, one of the NCOs knew, open up a hood for me and I have no clue. So we got it going and, drove back towards our regular compound. Only about halfway back to discover an hour or so earlier, the VC had set up a whole roadblock.
Oh boy.
If that Jeep would have started and we would have left when we wanted to leave, we'd have driven right into that. There, for the grace of God, went we. But why that Jeep wouldn't start, who knows?
Wow.
Sometime later, we were going to go out on an operation one night, and we were getting ready to go. And a man that was ethnically Chinese, which is very different from the rest of the village, came in and talked to my interpreter. And I saw him talking to each other, and I was getting ready to go. And after he left, my interpreter said, "We're not going anyplace tonight." I went, "Yes, I am." And then became this little debate, where a Vietnamese interpreter does not tell a team leader what he's going to do or not do. That was just so out of character.
Right.
And so I said, "Well, we're going to go." And he said, "No, we aren't." And I said, "I'm going." He says, "You won't get out of the gate." So at that point, I went, okay. Next morning, the guy comes back and the interpreter says, "Well, we need to get out of the village and go to work." And okay, what's going on? Well, it turned out that operation I was going to go on that night, I wasn't to return. That it kind of had been figured out that the platoon leader who I was going to go with was going to ensure that that was a one-way trip for me.
Really?
Really. And the guy that came into the compound, who I kind of thought he was, but wasn't absolutely positive, wasn't just a fisherman. He was really an operative for the CIA, for the Vietnamese side, and knew enough about what was going on, and could find enough about what was going on. And it was really a bad thing for a district to lose an American advisor. It's just not a good thing.
Right.
And so they knew this was going to happen. Needless to say, I'm sitting here, so it didn't happen. And I never saw that platoon leader again.
Did he escape?
I don't think so.
Okay.
They never told me. I asked about 3 times, and it just said that he's not going to be around.
Do you happen to know why the interpreter didn't want to tell you that night?
I think if for his own safety and everybody else's, it was just to be not talked about until later.
Okay.
That's really all I know.
There's no more insight on that.
Yeah, there was no more insight, no more discussion.
Wow.
With the rest of the platoon when I was with him, it was never brought up, referred to, nothing. It was just like for everybody else, it never happened.
Right.
And I have no clue why, I have no clue. But something in that process intervened in a big way, and
right.
That was that.
That's incredible.
It's just those two things just points out what could have been and how easily it could have been.
Right.
But it wasn't.
Were you any more or less reluctant than after that to go out on these missions?
No, it was still about the same. But all of a sudden I had kind of a little bit more of an appreciation for what was really going on around me.
Right.
That it wasn't just as straightforward or simple as I sometimes thought it was. There was just a more complex dynamic there.
Right.
I mean, I had heard or knew something was different with this ethnic Chinese gentleman that came in and said something, but I never knew what it was. I found out a little bit more what it was. So it was a level of intrigue that sometimes was just kind of hanging out there. You never knew. When I went north to Fanriku in that area, nothing like that.
Well,
It was just much lower key. It was just not, in one way, not much happening around the RF level. Again, the regional Vietnamese force level, it was much more some of the main forces, and we were not expected to engage them in any way, shape, or form.
okay.
So that was some of the big things. The other then that happened after I was in Fanry for a few months, the district senior advisor, and there's a district senior advisor, American level, who all the MAT teams work for in that district. That major had moved on. And this was also beginning to be the time of the withdrawal of major American forces out of Vietnam. They moved me back to Hai Long again as the district senior advisor. So, I'm a first lieutenant, that's a major slot.
Wow.
But, oh, by the way, you're pretty much by yourself. You know, you have your interpreter, you have a couple other things. So that changed the dynamic even more. Probably in those 2 months I did that, I probably only went in the field 4 or 5 times. 2 small contacts, nothing. My role there was to stay out of trouble, not get in trouble. But again, the intrigue of that, kind of that area, came into play again. Is that my routine out there was just going out and hanging out and seeing what was going on, finding out what the RFs were doing, occasionally going with them, like I said, but not very often, because I was by myself. So again, the same compound I'm in, that kind of one day that I was getting ready to go out and do some stuff, and 2 Vietnamese soldiers, get in the back of the Jeep with me. That never happens. So me and my interpreter, the 2 soldiers are in the back. And I said something to my interpreter about, we're going to take them down, what's going on? I said, they're going to hang out with us. Okay. So, kind of making a little more complicated story, shorter. These 2 guys essentially became my bodyguards. Wow. I did not know that. That's my dog barking, and he's not my bodyguard. And it kind of came out that there were some rumblings about my own safety out there, and so they assigned a couple of soldiers to be with me. If I was in the city in my hotel, when I came out of the hotel and got on my Jeep, they were there. If I was out in the field, and they were there. And it kind of became when I said, what are they supposed to do? My interpreters, and they said, oh, you'll be fine with it. It turns out the rules of the road was whatever happened to me happened to them.
Okay.
So it was kind of a personal thing for them, that I was safe. And that probably is the one thing that kind of rattled me a little bit. Like, why do I have to have them? I never... And they just kind of said, well, you're alone. I knew there was more to it than that.
Right.
But it's like the other event, they would never really tell you.
Right.
And it just became what it is.
It's a little unnerving.
It's a little unnerving. But in some ways, in those last few months, it was less unnerving to be out in the field with some of the Vietnamese than it was to be in the American compounds. Because in the American compounds, towards the end of 71, is when the drug use and behavior on the American soldiers was rapidly going up.
Right.
The amount of cocaine, heroin that was on the streets in that area you couldn't believe it. I mean, it was blatantly, completely always there. And in the hotel, which was the Province Senior Hotel, there was a platoon of young Marines that was security for that hotel. And when I was in there, for better or for worse, my room was next to the Marines, the first sergeant's room. The good news was the night they decided to cause him some harm, the American Marines decided to cause their first sergeant some harm. They only used a tear gas grenade, which caused enough of its own problem for us physically. Either they didn't have or they didn't use a frag grenade, which went on in other places. And some other things were happening with them. I decided at that point in time I was safer in the Vietnamese compound than I was in the American compound. It may sound stupid, but that's where my emotion, had me. The province senior advisor was not really happy that I was out there. He thought I should be in there. So he and I kind of had a long-range debate of why I was not in the hotel in the safe area, why I was in the compound in the field.
Right.
Well, I felt safer there. It's silly, it's stupid, it sounds ridiculous, but that's where I felt. And so I'd always tell him I had a reason to be out there, which pretty soon he realized was horse manure. And he got quite forceful about me being back in the hotel at night because he wanted, the safety factor and what he thought for me. But we went through this time after time. It was really worrisome with these young guys doing whatever drugs they were doing, hating their first sergeant, and what went on there, and just having to be close to that.
Right.
It was actually, I'm serious, it was scarier than the compounds. And I think it was scarier because the threat was from within.
Right.
And we knew all the stories that went on about platoon leaders and stuff being fragged in some of the major American units. And you kind of see that could happen there. And that was not a good feeling. And so that's why, that was towards the end we did that.
Right. Did you still have your bodyguards with you when you went back?
When I went back on the field, I did.
Mm-hmm.
But once I hit the compound, the American compound, then they were not allowed in there.
Really?
So it was the compound there we were staying was relatively small. I mean, it was just a big hotel built in the 50s or something like that.
Okay.
So it was the funny part too about that particular hotel. I had a room kind of in the front, and the schoolhouse right across the street from that. There was a school that, as a child, Ho Chi Minh had attended.
Really?
Yeah. So it was just the historical pieces that kind of, or at least that's what we were told.
Okay.
It was kind of the historical pieces that kind of come together from what was happening in the 60s versus what happened there in the 40s and the 50s and the French influence and all that went on.
Okay. So, what about back home? Were you able to keep in contact with family or friends?
Back home. I came back home in the end of May, June of 1970. Now, when I came back home, we came back into, again, Travis in Oakland, California. The first TV program I'd seen in the year was that night I saw the Indianapolis 500. So that was
You remember that?
I remember that. That was just the normal processing out. and them thanking us for our service and sending us out the door. But a lot of us didn't have any civilian clothes, and so we flew back. In my case, was flying back to Boston and then to New Hampshire, where my parents lived. Going into San Francisco Airport to fly home, wearing an Army uniform, was not a pleasant experience. We got to, this was myself and one other guy, we were flying home together. It was really ugly and mean. The comments on baby killers and, spitting and all the kind of stuff that went on. And I think part of that, it was a very, very hostile, threatening, reaction. And my buddy and I, we actually went and hid in the USO area until, we could fairly quickly get to a plane and go. It really set the tone for years and years and years of not wanting to talk or deal with it. Nobody really cared what we did or went through, and in many cases thought it was your own damn fault, so to hell with you. The nicest thing that happened to me coming back is when I first graduated college, I was going to go to graduate school at Florida State, Tallahassee, Florida. And then it wasn't because of the football, but so I'd been accepted to graduate school. And because of the change in the draft and everything, I couldn't go. And so I just wrote them down and said, I can't go, And their comment back was, well, when you come home, if you want to still come to graduate school, just let us know and we'll do that. And so it was probably when I was about 3/4 of the way through my tour in Vietnam, I'd written to Florida State and said, I want to come back, I want to go. And there was an attempt at exchanging information and sending me, applications and stuff, which, because of mail stuff coming, I never got any of it. And so the last letter I kind of sent to them, they just sent back, I think it was through my parents, and said, when you come home, just come down. No applications, just come down. Which I did. And then started graduate school there in September of 70. Got out of the Army in June and went down there in September. And got an apartment, they filled it out, the university was wonderful and gracious to me completely. The only thing that was different about it, one of the admissions folks asked me if I wanted to be part of the university's chapter of Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Really?
And I said, no, I want no part of it on either side. And he said, fine, not a problem. There were about 4 veterans in that group, and none of us wanted any part of it. And the university was true to their word, as they never, ever, as a university, put any questions, nothing from faculty. As far as that experience went, we were completely left alone, which is what we wanted. Yeah. No pressures either way. No, and that was probably the best thing they could have done. Is I appreciated their question, the way it was done,
right,
but even more appreciated their respect of the answer. And truthfully, from that one brief conversation, that was the last that was said about it. And probably, fortunately, it was a school in the South. And there was some, activity in the chapter that was there, but they basically respected what we did and left us, the 4 or 5 of us that were in that class alone, which is a good thing.
Right. Can you remind me again what year you came back?
I came back in 1970, so essentially Memorial Day weekend of 1970.
Okay.
And the discharge from the Army was that, in that processing right out there is, you were literally out of the field and back in your house in less than a week.
And were you discharged between that time?
Yes. You got out of the field, spent about a day in Saigon turning everything back in, maybe it was 2 days. Processed out, got on the airplane, landed in, California, 2 days of processing out, and a day's flight home. That was it. And then you're just turned loose into the hostile world of the Vietnam veteran at that point in time. And some of that hostility in that whole part is why, I think I told you before, very few of us would talk about that, adventure. I don't know which was worse, what pops in your mind in remembrances of some of the fighting and the issues and what you did there versus some of the hostile reaction and the negative and the bitterness of what you came home to. Which one of those shut us up more? 10 years ago, I would never have this conversation with you. Just would not happen. 5 years ago, probably wouldn't have happened. And it's only, what are we, from 1970 to 2015? 45 years before you're really even willing to talk about it. All of us who were there have a different experience. Some extremely bitter, some extremely damaged, some just wondering. I'm probably just wondering in the category. And so it's that level. It's very, very different from anybody who wears a uniform today as a hero. I can't buy into that. But it's kind of the over the top reaction the other way from we got coming home in that time frame.
Yeah.
Like I said, several years ago, you and I would not have this conversation. And even my son said a while ago, I think it was the last time we were with him, a few months ago. And he's 30, he'll be 39. And he said to me, I have told him more in the last 2 years than I have told him in the last 30 years.
Do you mind telling what changed?
I think it's society it became okay to talk about it. It as the over-the-top reaction went the other way, it became okay. When I came home, even the perception was, whether it was the American Legion or the VA,
Right.
Nobody wanted to deal with Vietnam veterans. Nobody wanted any part of you. And that's a tough one to take.
Yeah.
It wasn't even subtle. It wasn't subtle. It was just blatant. And so, especially when you come in and you live in a community or an area that was so hostile, to the war, and when you're living here in between Boston and New York, with major universities, it was really a hostile area to it. It's not like you're living in Georgia or Alabama or something where the reactions were quite different. You just button that side of your life up.
Right.
My wife didn't know, except when we were first living together, that she knew something wasn't right when how fast I would startlingly wake up at night or something and set it off. It wasn't just normal. And that lasted a couple of years. But it's now okay. And even you see, the veterans organizations now have, for years now been more welcoming. But in the 60s and the 70s, even the veterans organizations were not welcoming. Because they even had gotten to the point where many of the folks that had served in World War II, Korea, also had bad attitudes, or at least we perceived they had bad attitudes about our service. Mm-hmm. And when you turn around and you say you've lost 58,000 Americans, that's a hell of a lot. And for what for? That's an editorial comment. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So.
Would you say that it affected your life? Or, of course it did, but how would you say it affected your life afterwards?
It has a huge impact. And I think what it does is it buttons up 3 or 4 years of your life and just with major life experiences that only stay within you. My wife never knew. My son never knew. He just didn't let it hang out there with anybody. And so when you compress something like that and you just try to wall it off, and the friends you lost, your IOCS roommate was killed. It's just I can't describe it. It's a huge thing, and when you see and understand that you watch the Army and everybody else initially claim that something like PSDT wasn't real. Horse manure. You knew it was real. And have them try to deny care to a lot of guys that needed it. It leaves you with a bitter taste.
Right.
And you can use other examples. But the community did not accept us. The government support teams did not accept us. And so you were on the outs for many reasons, but so long as you didn't talk about it,
right,
it was fine. It's only if you tried to talk about it within a group that it became kind of politically incorrect to do that. And that's not good. And as I sit here and editorial comment all these years later and watch and read and have acquaintances that have done tours in Iraq or Afghanistan, it's like the same thing all over again as far as tactics. Same mistakes. It's like, folks, didn't you learn? My neighbor, a young man across the street's a West Point graduate, got out of the Army as a captain, a couple of tours in Iraq. And so we sat down one day and just compared equipment. You watch and you see, so we sit up on body armor. And so he had all the technology, the body armor and stuff, and said, well, what did you have? A t-shirt. And they had, seriously, we wore just the basic fatigue uniform and a hat. That's it.
Right.
There were some flak jackets around, but they were the old heavy sand. Just huge things. And he had the huge armored vehicles. Had a Jeep. That's it. With a canvas top.
Yeah.
Just the different technologies that come across, but yet the tactics and what goes on, much of that, it's the same thing. They started out in Vietnam with then the Special Forces, the Green Berets and everything, doing all the advisory stuff, very high end. Well, the time we were there, were a bunch of brand new second and first lieutenants doing it. Same thing. Mm-hmm. You go to Iraq or Afghanistan, it's all the Delta Force now, it's all the Special Forces doing the same. From my perspective, same thing the Green Berets were doing 50-some years ago in Vietnam, making the same mistakes. and you watch what comes full circle. We know how Vietnam ended. We know how the governments and the troops there reacted. Was anybody surprised why the Iraqi army wasn't able to defend its country and take care of itself? Is anybody surprised what's happening in 2015 in Afghanistan with the Afghanistan army? You can't tell me it's any different. So it's having lived it once and watching it happen again.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what to say, I'll just use mine. It's history repeating itself. And that makes you, I'll use the word sad.
Yeah.
But at least the guys coming in and out of that are welcomed.
Right.
Where the millions, about 2 million, I'll just say guys, there were many women there, but came through Vietnam, were not welcomed. And that's the most difficult part of it.
But you were able to go back to school.
Oh, absolutely. Able to, very welcomed at Florida State, which is something we're eternally grateful for.
So there's that.
Put your life back to, you move on and
Exactly.
You have a great son who was a pain in the ass as a teenager. I have a wonderful 2-year-old grandson, which is it. But speaking of my son, the one thing that made me very, very happy is he never had to do what I did.
Right.
I suppose the other thing I didn't say in the beginning, but my father was also in World War II. My father went into D-Day on day 2 with the 101st Airborne. So you get these connections that kind of ebb and flow. Do we have a military history in our family? Well, yeah, but not career, and that's not necessarily voluntary.
Right.
But it's there, and so Josh, my son, got to know a little bit about what his grandfather did. And then much later in life, what I did. And the funny part of that, by the way, is when he took a course in college, a history course on the Vietnam War. Like, I'm sitting, wait a minute, my experience in a history course in college? But yeah, so it's some of that things, and the craziness of the politicians or the State Department people or the CIA that were there.
Yeah.
One of the other funny things that happened, I forgot. You jogged my memory on many things. Seriously, one day we went off. We were going to go to a ceremony, and this is up in Fanry in one of their big open fields. Right. Kids play soccer in the big field, and so I ended up going there, and it ends up being the president of Vietnam too was there, and not much farther, a little bit farther from you and I are doing this interview, but not as far as, one end of my house to the next. With the other person who was with him was William Colby, who at that point in time was the ambassador to Vietnam, the CIA station chief.
Okay.
Now look, this guy comes out in the field with a blue pinstripe shirt. I mean, as if he was in Washington. Anybody who knew anything about him knew that was one of the persons in Vietnam he just didn't mess with. Talk about organizing coups and a few things like that. That's where that came from. But here you are, you're a 25-year guy, you're a first lieutenant, which, by the way, means not much of anything. I've got more weapons on me, locked and loaded, with 2 major political figures in the world standing within, feet of me.
Right.
And I just kind of got to the point where, like, what is this all about? And it was fascinating to stand there and just realize where you were, who was near you. And can you imagine today being as much armed as I was being that close to, significantly political figures in the world.
Right.
It was just, it's like, all of a sudden you realize it. And you just go, like, wow.
Was that something you thought then, or was that retroactive?
No, about halfway through where I was, when we were doing that, it came to my mind. Because because don't forget, through high school, I went through the assassinations of JFK, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King. You go through those, and you realize how just where you are and what they're doing, and the trust they've got in you.
Right.
On the other hand, well, maybe I'm doing this in case something happens. I'm supposed to go the other way. But yeah, it was just an interesting phenomenon.
Okay. Well, speaking more tangibly, you came back and then you went to school. Can you speak to any of the training that you had that might have helped you through life?
I think the thing through life that makes a difference is some of the leadership issues.
Yeah.
Some of the things is just take charge and do it. One of the things in the Army is if you're going to take the hill, you're going to take the hill. There's just not a lot of, debate about it. You may debate a little bit how I'm going to do it, but you just go. And so often in life, you just get to the point where, you've got to do something. You just do it. Sometimes in this day and age, that may not be what people really want. They want you to do it, be a little bit more subtle, a little bit more softer, a bit nicer about doing it. But you just do it.
Right.
And you've got a task to do. You make sure you succeed at it.
Right.
And sometimes some of us have that experience. You do it without the subtleties, or there are a few ego casualties along the way that if I'd have grown up differently, might not happen that way.
Right.
But that's the big thing. Some of the emotion that comes with it, and it's a great big been there, done that.
Right.
Inside of yourself, you're in one way glad you did it, another way proud you did it, and another way thank God you survived it. As I said earlier, the thing is, what do you want out of the Army? Me with no holes. And we accomplished that.
Yeah.
But it's a big thing, and as I showed you, I've got a map there that will be part of the collection. But having things like that, and sometimes people come down and look at it and just say, "What is that?" Then you explain it a little bit, and some are fascinated, and some are just go, "Oh," and But it's the things you've done and said, and the people you've met. I don't have any hostile, negative feelings at all about the Vietnamese people that I was with. They were fascinating, wonderful people, living in those villages. Yeah, some of them wanted to kill me, and I killed some of them, but that's, it's different. It's a beautiful country. Mm-hmm. I mean, I got an all-expenses-paid tour of Southeast Asia. It's a gorgeous place. In fact, that area of Hai Long, we would do a lot of, as we went through the villages, as we went up on the dunes and did a lot of ambushing, there were probably 40 miles of white sand beach that are the most gorgeous beach I've seen any place. Just fantastic. And a number of us joked when we were there that we really liked, when this whole thing was over, go back and own some of that and build a hotel. Because we surely would make $1 billion doing that. Mm-hmm. Well, 40 years later, it's fun to go on Google Earth. And now that you can drill down to the exact areas we were in, that whole area is one long strip of gorgeous resorts.
Somebody had the same idea.
So yeah, but they're all the European. They're not the high-rise Hiltons, and it's. But you go, and you can see where you were. You can see how they took the roads out, where they put what where. Let the people move back up into the what was the forest then, and moved the fishing villages up further. I mean, it's a gorgeous. I knew it was gorgeous when we were there. But then you can read online and stuff when that really happened. That really didn't begin to happen, from what I read, until about the 90s. Mm-hmm. For 20 years or so, it stayed the fishing, as they talk about the rugged fishermen. Right. And yeah, they were rugged fishermen. So it's sometimes fun to look back and see what it was and what it's become.
Right. Did you get to keep in touch with anybody that you served with?
For years, no, nobody.
No.
And a few years ago, I guess it would be the advent of Facebook.
Right.
Somehow the major and I, who worked together in Hilo for quite a bit, as a man who I have immense respect for, he and I reconnected. Mm-hmm. And he had stayed in the Army as a career and retired and lives in Texas. I had seen him once, about 3 years after we were back, a couple of years, that when I was still in Tallahassee. He drove through there for some reason, we connected for an evening. But he and I now stayed together, and Tracy just had his 80th birthday.
Okay. Who was it?
His name is Tracy Baker.
Okay. And he was a major in the Army.
He was a major with me. I don't know what he probably retired as a lieutenant colonel or colonel. Okay. A couple, 3 tours over there. And he taught me a lot. Good guy. A good guy to work with, good guy to work for, a good person to be around. Mm-hmm. Unlike many of the other majors I met, which were first-class idiots. But, because in the end, a lot of the early field grade officers wanted to come through there just to punch their ticket, and they were very dangerous. Right. But I connected with Tracy, and I've had a couple of contacts with a couple of the OCS guys I went with. Not many. The other one that was probably the most interesting one is, I said earlier, my OCS roommate was killed. And he was married at the time, and they had at that time, an infant, a daughter. And I'd thought about Phil a good bit, but I never connected in terms of anything with him. And then I discovered on the web one day there's a virtual wall, the wall there, and it had everybody's name and stuff off the wall. And so I ended up making it had a contact person. And so I thought about it for about a week, and then emailed the contact person off that wall, who turned out to be his daughter. Wow. I thought I only had one picture from OCS of Phil, which I sent to them, and I said, I don't want to be too forward but this is a picture I have of your father. Very quickly got a long email back from his wife. And we emailed a couple of times, and she did not remarry for 20 years.
Wow.
Then within the last few months, I ended up being able to be Facebook friends with his daughter. Mm-hmm. And so there's every once in a while, there's an acknowledgement of who she is and who I am. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting to see the woman who was the baby and her children. Yeah. And think a little bit of, for Phil, what would have been. Right. But Phil was killed 3 weeks before we were coming home.
Oh, no.
So it's one of those things, but it's with what's happened with social media and stuff, to be able to find your roommate's daughter 40 years later and see pictures of what would have been his grandchildren, and have communicated with his wife in terms of, her not remarrying and just raising the daughter. Interesting.
Yeah. Was there any were they hesitant at all to communicate with you?
No, not at all. Bingo. I mean, I was more hesitant to communicate with them than they were with me. They got a hilarious charge out of the funny picture I had of Phil. It was he was standing in our room in OCS, and he had his uniform, perfect uniform. I mean, everything perfect down to his waist, and he was standing in his boxer shorts. And I mean, it's one of those captions you get that you always can laugh about because that was your roommate, what you did. But then for his family to have that, it was kind of they were appreciative. They liked it.
It's good.
And so that's kind of, but as I said, you come home, you do this, you button it up.
Right.
I've talked to you longer about this than have anybody ever. That, and I've told you things I've never told you. And it's more because you asked. There's stuff that just don't roll off your tongue in terms of some of that. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So you haven't really spoken to anybody else about it. Does that mean that you haven't really indulged in any of the organizations like the American Legion or any of the VFWs?
No, I have not engaged with any of them.
Okay.
A couple of toes in the door, stuff with the American Legion, but the comfort zone wasn't there, and it's probably my comfort zone.
Right.
I just didn't stay with it.
Okay.
With the event that we went to, a month or so ago for veterans, I did talk to the VFW there. Maybe if something comes out, it comes out of that, but it's not in my. My father was a lifelong Legionnaire and all this kind of stuff with it, but I still don't. Maybe I still haven't gotten over the reactions of what they were like 40-some years ago, and so truthfully, I really want no part of them. For better or for worse, I don't.
Okay.
And like I said, I don't. The funny thing, I think I first started wearing, you get your veterans caps and stuff. I probably got my first one 2 years ago.
Do you wear it?
Yeah, I wear it.
Okay.
I pick where I wear it, but I'll wear it.
Yeah. What about the 50th? Did you wear it there?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did take it there and wear it. And probably the most fun I had the 50th that the project put on was the Huey helicopter ride.
Yeah.
As I said, I never knew helicopters had doors on them, until a while ago. And but that was a good ride. It was. I said to my wife, it was a fun ride with no stress.
Right.
But you can tell the sound of a Huey. I don't care where it is. You can tell the difference.
Of course. Yeah.
And sounds make a huge difference. You could tell the difference in the sound of a rifle shot or a group of them. You could tell exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between M16s and 47s, and it's just amazing what sound does and how you can become, really attuned to certain things. Mm-hmm. And so it's
will stay with you forever.
Yeah, a lot of, especially the loud ones.
Yeah.
A lot of us now have, little hearing issues with some of the loud noises and stuff, but it's they stay with you. You understand them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gale, if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
I think I've said enough.
Okay. But we do appreciate your time.
Glad to.
And taking the time to do this with us, but more than anything, your service. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your interest.